John Fiery Justice Little has been on an amazing run in live tournaments so far in 2007. He kicked off the year by final tabling the PokerStars Caribbean Adventure. He finished in 5th place and earned more than $300,000. Since then, he's gone on to make 6 other final tables and the semi-finals of the Heads Up event at the Mirage Poker Showdown. And speaking of the Mirage Poker Showdown, one of his final tables was in the championship event of that series, and he sealed the deal there to win the event and more than $1 million. He has almost $1.8 million in winnings so far this year and currently sits in 5th place in the Card Player Player of the Year race. Little isn't just a live multi-table tournament mastermind, he also has quite a knack for the online sit-and-goes. His skill is such that he started working with a site called sngicons.com, a sit-and-go training site, and he claims that his current goal in poker is to become so good at sit-and-goes that no one ever wants to play against him. Little is here with us in the studio to talk about what it takes to beat sit-and-goes online. Alright, so how you doing, John?
Doing wonderful. How about you?
I'm doing very well. Great. So, I mean, you've obviously had a huge amount of success in live tournaments lately, especially this year. How do you transition from online poker to live poker successfully?
I studied a lot of books about tells and how to read people, because that's how you get chips in big tournaments, is making calls with, much weaker hands than you normally would.
Right.
Just because of the way a person's acting or whatever. Online, you can't do that so much. You actually have to play your cards more so than the people. Although you do play the people too, but you can generally make better reads against people live, and that'll give you a lot of chips.
Well, I've asked this of quite a few people, and you say you can make better reads from people live, obviously, but like what kind of reads can you get from people playing online?
Usually, people use the auto buttons. Often, like they'll auto fold or auto raise, and usually that gives hands away. And also, whenever people check quickly, they usually have like a medium strength hand. And, just stuff like that. There's some stuff written about it online, I guess, but it's a lot to talk about.
Right. Well, how about as far as qualifying for live tournaments online? How often do you do that when you're going to play? When you know you're going to play in a live tournament, how often do you go out of your way and go gung ho at the live qualifiers?
I really don't play that many qualifiers online. Occasionally, I'll play some double shootouts here and there because they're like sit and goes.
Right.
And that's usually about it, unless they have a bigger buy-in one where like the top 20% of the field get a seat. Usually I play those, but
Gotcha.
Besides that, I don't play very many of them.
Gotcha. Well, and you're part of this online training site called sngicons.com, and how did you guys get started with that, and what was the idea behind it? What do you guys do?
Well, we noticed looking at all the training sites online that none of them really focus specifically on sit-and-goes, so we decided to help out a bunch of the lower stakes sit-and-go players because there really wasn't a whole lot of help for them out there.
Right. And it is specifically geared towards lower stakes sit-and-goes then?
There's high stakes and low stakes sit-and-goes, as well as some multi-table stuff here and there because people were requesting it, because I guess I've been doing well at them.
Right.
But besides that, it's mainly low to mid-stakes sit-and-goes, sit-and-go information, along with some high stakes sit-and-go information here and there.
Well, and you say information, what does that entail? Is it mainly just written articles, or is there some video stuff as well, or what's it all entail now?
We have a forum where our members can post hands and we'll answer the questions, and also we have videos where it'll be a video of one of the professionals four-tabling sit-and-goes, or we'll go over an interesting sit-and-go and a hand history and talk about every hand that's important and what you should do in every situation.
Okay, well, let's get right to the gut of the question. Is there a way that you can play sit-and-goes, like a kind of a standard way to play sit-and-goes that will pretty much guarantee a profitability or a positive ROI?
There's definitely a way to play sit-and-goes where you can make money, especially at the lower levels. You can just play very tight early and then steal the blinds a lot late, and you'll definitely make a lot of money. Probably around at least 10% ROI, but probably more around 20% at the $10, $20 games. And at the higher stakes, it's a bit tougher now because everyone plays pretty well. Like even the weaker players still play pretty good, and usually you don't make more than the rake off of them, so it makes it tough to beat the higher stakes games now.
Well, and it's also probably the case that just because the lower stakes sit-and-goes are more populated, you can kind of adhere to a very specific structure of the way you play a tournament, tight at the beginning, looser at the end, without having people notice. Is that the case? That's
true, because you don't play against the same people over and over. I mean, you may play with one person that plays all the same sit-and-goes as you, but besides that, everyone plays, most people are like one-tabling, just because they're populated, and
right.
Everyone's not playing sit-and-goes professionally or whatever, so you can just play the basic strategy and you'll make money.
Well, so then how many, especially at the lower stakes then, since you're able to play that kind of structured way, how many tables would you say you can play at once comfortably? I mean,
I can play about 16, but most people play between 4 and 8.
Okay.
They play a lot.
And do you have any idea of how much you're lowering your ROI every time you add a table?
I don't really lower my ROI that much by adding a table because I already know how to play, the strategy very well, so I don't really have to think about it. But if you actually have to think about it and take your time on decisions, you should only play as many to where you're not timing out ever.
Right.
Because when you start timing out, that's when it becomes a problem.
Gotcha. So that's a good gauge. Once you start running down your time bank,
exactly.
you know that you're probably overextending yourself a little bit. Okay.
On sites like Full Tilt, they just recently shortened their time that you have to act on the hands, and that's made a lot of players play less sit and goes at a time. So.
Yep. What's the biggest mistake that you see a lot of people playing sit and goes make?
At the lower stakes sit and goes, people usually don't push around on the bubble near as much as they should, because late in a sit and go, you're trying to. Most people, they think they're just trying to barely squeak into the money, whereas usually if you just take initiative, you can get in the money with the chip lead.
Mm-hmm.
And it's very important to do that. That'll increase your ROI huge if you can just double up every single time you get on the bubble. And it's very, very doable at the lower buy-in games because people fold way too often.
Right, on the bubble. Well, so a lot of people say you should start really being aggressive towards the money bubble of sit and goes, but like, what exactly does that mean? Like, what kind of hands should you start playing? What positions should you start exploiting? Like, how should you actually enact that?
In a normal online sit and go, everyone has about 10 big blinds when you get to the bubble. Mainly, the only ones that run are turbos nowadays. So, everyone's pretty short by the time you get to the bubble, and whenever you're in the small blind, you should be going all in almost every hand, especially if you're the big stack or the small stack. If you're the medium stacks, you should generally be hanging around trying to wait for the short stack to bust. But if you're the small stack or the big stack, you should be trying to accumulate as many chips as possible.
When you say you should be pretty much pushing in every time in the small blind, you mean when the action's folded to you? You should pretty much, okay.
Yes, definitely. Whenever they fold to you, you should push. And like same for the button. Whenever you have probably like the top 50% of hands or more, depending on the situation, of course.
Mm-hmm.
We talk about that on sngicons.com, how to, which hands to be pushing in which spots. But you should be pushing a lot and stealing the blinds, because every time you steal the blinds, you increase your stack by 20% or something like that. And if you do it 5 times, you're free rolling whenever you get called.
Right. Cool. Well, what about the higher stakes sit and goes? What kind of mistakes are you still seeing people make there?
Usually the people play poorly in the early levels in those sit and goes. People will. I think a lot of those guys are like cash game players, and they try to outplay you pre-flop in the early levels of sit and go, whereas they don't really realize that you're only playing the good hands anyways, so you're never going to fold, usually in the early levels. So they're usually just trying to bluff you in really bad bluffing spots.
Right. Cool. Well, and an important factor to consider for sit and goes is bankroll management. I mean, that's pretty much the case for poker in general, really, but especially for sit and goes. How do you calculate the bankroll that you need to play in a certain buy-in of sit and goes?
It really depends on if you're going to play professionally or recreationally, and I guess how often you're going to play. But
we're mainly talking about people that are trying to push a profit out of this.
Okay.
So.
You should. I generally keep about 100 buy-ins online. So if you're playing $10 sit and goes, what's that? $1,000. And that seems like a lot to most people, but you'll have pretty bad swings. Like I've had an 80 buy-in downswing before, and it's rough. But if you're prepared for it, it's okay, and you'll come out on top.
Well, you're saying that you can prepare for the downswings, but when you have like a really bad downswing, how exactly do you prepare for? How do you handle it?
I usually take a day or two off and go over my last 100 or so sit and goes using a program like Sit and Go Power Tools, which tells you when you should be pushing and if you're missing any plus EV pushes, or if you're making negative EV pushes, because those all cost you money.
Mm-hmm.
And usually, if you're giving away any money in a sit and go, that's the reason you're losing.
Right.
Because you're going to get bad beat here and there, but usually it's because you're not playing bad, and that's why you have pretty big downswings usually.
Well, and a lot of people aren't simply focusing on sit and goes, like they're playing cash games and multi-tables as well. So if you're having a bad run in just sit and goes, is it okay to, do you think personally it's okay to continue playing the other things, but just to kind of take sit and goes out of the equation? Is it different enough, or do you need to just take a break from poker, period?
I really suggest you focus on one type of poker at a time. It's not really good to be playing, multi-table tournaments, sit and goes, and cash games, because they're all totally different games. But if you can handle it, you can just cut out the sit and goes for a while or whatever. But if you're profitable at the game, you should, work on it and become the best you can be at it.
Gotcha, gotcha. What process do you use to move up in the stakes?
Whenever I first started, I would be playing like $10 sit-and-goes or whatever, and then whenever I got about 150 buy-ins, I would, jump up to the $20 sit-and-goes or whatever.
150 buy-ins for
the $10 games.
Okay.
Like, so I say I had $1,500, I would, kind of gamble a little bit at the $20 games, and then, work my bankroll up there. And if things went bad and I got down to 100 buy-ins, I would drop back down to the $100 games. And if you do that, it's almost a guarantee that you won't go broke playing the games. And that's the goal, I guess, to make sure you're always profitable.
Right. Well, and speaking of profitability, actually, what kind of ROI is realistic for a sit-and-go player, especially at the lower stakes?
At the lower stakes, you can easily get 20% ROI, maybe higher if you figure out who the bad players are and follow them around. And at the higher level, you can probably get maybe 10% after you get frequent player points or whatever, because those add up too.
Right.
But the games are very tough at the higher levels right now, just because there aren't a whole lot of bad players playing them.
Right. Well, and what kind of sample size is realistic to start taking your ROI seriously? Because, a lot of people are like, yeah, I played 100 sit-and-goes and I have a huge ROI, and that strikes me as probably not an accurate sample size.
That's what I did when I first started, actually. I was like, I played 1,000 games and I have 50% ROI. I'm the best player ever. But that's not how it is. You need to play probably about 3,000 games to figure out what your ROI is, and probably about 1,000 games to figure out what your in the money percentage is.
Okay. And do you have any, you mentioned turbo sit-and-goes before, do you have any specific strategies for turbo sit-and-goes?
Usually it magnifies the way you play a sit-and-go in general. So usually you should play tighter early and much more loose late, just because in the early levels of sit-and-goes, the blinds are still very low, so you need to only be playing premium hands so that you have chips to push around whenever the tournament gets late, like whenever everyone has 5 or 6 big blinds, because usually the people fold way too much in the later levels of the game. And in the late levels, you should be pushing a lot more than you would think you should, and that's where our training site will help you and tell you where you should be pushing and the spots where you wouldn't normally think about it. Okay,
cool. And I just have really one more question for you, and it's about, you had mentioned shootout tournaments earlier. Just for people that don't know, shootout tournaments are basically a sit-and-go master's dream. You have to win multiple single-table sit-and-goes in a row to be able to take down the top prize. So like for a triple shootout, you have to win 3 sit-and-goes to win the first place prize. 3 single-table sit-and-goes. So is there a specific strategy for shootouts, or is it so much exactly like a single-table sit-and-go that you just apply the normal single-table sit-and-go to it?
It's very similar to a sit-and-go where you're trying to win, but you can do things in the early and later levels to make sure that you have a better chance to actually win the tournament, because you're not trying just to get in the money.
Right.
Usually I play a little bit more loose in the early levels because you're trying to accumulate chips. It's no good to get heads up whenever one guy has 9,000 chips and you have 1,000. You just don't have that good of a chance to win. So
exactly.
You usually have to gamble a little bit more early, and in the later levels, I still push a lot, but not quite as much because there's not really a bubble, and everyone realizes they're trying to win, and getting second doesn't really help you.
Right. Cool. And actually, one more question, I lied. What is next for you on the live tournament circuit?
There's the U.S. Poker Bowl here in Vegas, and then the Caesars tournaments here. And then after that, Niagara Falls, and then Foxwoods.
Well, the Poker Bowl is actually becoming a really huge thing. What team are you on?
I'm on a team with some of the guys from the S&G Icons site. They're some of the best sit-and-go players in the world. So,
what's the team name?
The Chicago Sharks, I think.
I think. Great. Well, thank you for coming in, man. I really appreciate it. And good luck on all your live and online adventures.
Thank you.
And thank you guys for watching the Online Zone on Card Player TV.